What's your creepiest real-life story?
When I was little, around 8, I hated going to the dentist. He always made me uncomfortable for some reason. I remember thinking his smile stretched too far and seemed forced, like clowns. Anyway, my mom always came with me, and went back so I wouldn't be scared. One day, my dad had me, divorced parents, and had to take me to the dentist, but tried to make me go back alone so he could sit out in the lobby doing whatever. The assistants had to literally drag me back to the room, and you could hear me screaming and crying down the hall, refusing to sit in the chair. Finally, my dad came back to get me. Irritated I'd made a scene, he rescheduled my appointment to when my mom would have me, and we just left. He made a big deal about how bad I was acting and told my mom she was spoiling me and all sorts of shit. 2 weeks later, it's on the news that my dentist was charged with child pornography after molesting children under anesthesia and photographing it. I lived in a small college town, and my apartment complex was walking distance from the bar/downtown area. One weekday night, I stepped out on our front porch to smoke a cigarette or two. I was up late studying. I brought my textbook with me and sat down on the stairs while I smoked. A girl, who I had never met but who lived one apartment over but down on the ground floor, came home from downtown. She was by herself, and you could tell from her walk she had been drinking. She got in her apartment, and barely got the door closed before some guy, who came out of nowhere, knocked on her door. She opened, and I noticed he introduced himself, which was weird because it was after 2:30 am. Who comes to a strange girl's apartment at that time? So I decide to stay outside and pay attention. They ended up talking for over 10 minutes. She later acknowledged how weird the situation was but did not know how to end the conversation. He would do the creepiest things, like he reached up and strokes her hair at least 3 times, and would try and slowly inch his way closer to her and the door. I made a point of being loud with my textbook so he would know I was there, and he disappeared as eerily as he had come. We called the cops, and days later they had the girl and me sit with a sketch artist. As soon as the sketch was made public, floods of calls came in. Guy turned out to be a serial rapist who followed lone girls home from bars and pretended to be a cab offering them a ride. This girl just got lucky because she lived so close to the bars. He didn't get a chance to pull the cab routine. TL/DR. Creepy person followed a neighbor home. Probably only left because there was a witness. Serial rapist apprehended. When I was little, my mom would take me to Kmart and let me wander around the toy section while she shopped. Normal in the 70s. One day, as I was playing Simone Says, an old man walked up to me and was making small talk while I played. He eventually told me to come with him, and took me by the hand. We walked right down the main center aisle of the store right towards the exit sign in the back. As we crossed the last row, I looked to the right and saw my mom at the end of the row. I told him I saw my mom and had to go. I pulled away my hand and ran down to her. I didn't tell her what happened because I didn't want to get in trouble for going with a stranger. It was several years later that I realized that I had probably narrowly avoided being molested, kidnapped, or worse. I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back when I was in HS, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the county. We would then go out to find the scenes and film the exploration at night. This was about 2 years before Blair Witch. It was something to do while we got wasted on shitty beer and teenage bullshit. Eventually we ran out of places to go, and E equals few people, few murders, and got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and looking for the signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, and old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place, sure sign, and drove through the field and discovered an old, but not too old, house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. There were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen/dining area fairly easily. The table was the initial thing you noticed, and it was strange because of how normal it looked. It was set for a meal, and not a bowl was out of place. Only thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses and place settings were a first. Especially unbroken ones. As we investigated the area, we found the fridge had the disgusting remnants of a full stock, and the cupboards were full of canned and dry foods. This was also a first. One guy found mail on the counter from early June 1978, and another found a creepy-ass TV guide in the living room with UFOs on the cover. All the family photos were hanging up. Mom, Dad, bro and sis in their 1970s glory. Furniture was dusty, but in good condition. Closets were full. Everything was totally normal. Which was super abnormal. As we dug around the house, we all started to realize that this house had not been moved out of, it had been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete unplanned departure. We went upstairs and split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest, and obviously it was the younger boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well because almost right away from the hall, we heard the most fucking terrifying scream I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. We went running into the hallway and were all yelling questions at each other at the same time. After a few, really long, seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, "You have to go in and see." Walking down the hall and through the doorway, I prayed I wouldn't act like a pussy in front of my friends. I shouldn't have been concerned because the others were as scared as I was. The room itself opened up to the left of the doorframe, and centered on the right side of the room was a queenish-sized bed. Propped up on pillows, with the blanket drawn to the waist, arms on top of the blanket, and worst of all, head turned slightly so it was looking you straight in the eyes when you entered the room, was a life-sized porcelain doll. Snow white skin, jet black hair, cold dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up with our flashlights. Like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I could excuse it, but it was turned. Ready for when we walked in. Ready for 20 years. Hasty fucking exits were made down the stairs and into the car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out when we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that goddamn doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos. Setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names, but got nothing. No tragic car accident. No grisly massacre. No extended family. Just a tacky time capsule in the middle of nowhere. We found out that the county had taken possession of the land for non-payment of taxes, explaining the lots, but never tracked down any more information on what happened to them. Or why they left that fucking doll. Not very many creepy things happened to me, so sorry if this story is a bit dull, but it did freak me out a little at the time. A few years ago, when I was 14 or so, I was out walking my dog, a hyper Chesapeake Retriever mix, in a rural/suburban area. It was a fairly quiet road. A car would breeze by once every 5 minutes or so. An old gray Toyota Corolla or some car like that passed by. Nothing unusual. But a minute later, this car passes again. And the car slows down a ton when it's coming toward me, giving me the impression this guy was checking me out. This guy ends up passing up and down the road stalking me. I end up faking having a cell phone and talking to someone on the other end, in case he got any ideas. The dog gave me a sense of security too. After maybe the 6th or 7th time this guy does this, I duck into the woods to hide. He swings by twice more, and I wait 10 minutes to see if he comes back. He doesn't. I end up running back home, with a very confused and disappointed dog. I think later on there was a news story that matched my stalker's description and was charged with attempted rape. Could be wrong though. Still creepy. I didn't go for a walk for about a week after that.
Thank you for watching. Write in a comment which story scared you more,